with regards to laying out a game plan.
Amy?
I might just put that question over to Mr. Cridlin. Was that something that was given any consideration, or were those questions that you had asked when you met with other facilities about their communication strategy or alternate fundraising?
Okay, I do have a mic. Yeah, when we took our 3 or 4 tours and folks we had talked to, there were different options. One municipality hired a professional fundraiser. So they come in, raise a certain amount of funds, and they were paid a percent of that to actually do that work. Others, most were subcommittees of a larger committee that they had connections with the community, they had connections fundraising, they ran with the fundraising. I don't think, if I remember, there were any municipality that took fundraising on themselves. It was kind of a specialized thing. That's why they brought the professional in or turned it over to a citizens group with that ability. So it does vary. And I think Mr. Johnson would like to chime in.
Sure. Of the 2 facilities that I toured, one of them was in Pelham. It was a $36 million facility. It had a pretty decent gymnasium, a twin pad, and I forget what the other area is, but anyways, it was a $36 million facility. They happened to sell $12 million worth of land within their city boundaries. They just happened to have that on their books, so good for them. They didn't have any federal or provincial funding, but they did raise $3 million in fundraising. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what that community did, about population about 18,000, I believe, in Pelham. So that's what I can offer for a little bit of information.
Thank you. I think our communication strategy has kind of morphed into a financial discussion strategy, but that's okay. Just to put it back on track, though, with Matt standing there on the podium, back to the communications, do we have anything else for Matt at this point? Go ahead, Kim.
Thank you. Maybe not necessarily for you, but, well, no. Just thought I'd take this opportunity. Okay, no, this is for you. How important is it that we have a name for this project going forward with the communication?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your definition of important is, but lots of fundraising projects proceed, you know, without a defined name or a working name. I'm sure there's a different word that the architect would use, but sort of a working name for a project until there's, you know, naming rights sorted out or a community discussion around what you're going to name it, those sorts of things. So yeah, if you have a well-developed presence and feel for a place, of course that's fantastic, but it's been my experience that that's not going to be a major hindrance to the stuff that we would do. People understand what a recreational facility is going to be, whether it's the such and such recreational facility or not.
I'm tempted to call it Bob until we come up with a better name.
I was going to say, you knew what I was getting at, didn't you?
I think for branding, we do need to come up with a good name for it as part of the communication strategy. Maybe this is part of the fundraiser. You can throw in a buck and come up with a name. I don't know. Just something to engage folks. I think engagement is important. The dollars will eventually come, but we got to get people excited about this.
That's a good. Sorry, if I can jump back in just quickly on that. I think I hear you talking about engaging people in competitions. That's a you know, a popular strategy that is part of the strategy throughout the campaign is involving people in naming facilities. I should just warn, there are clearly inherent risks in doing that we would have to manage, but those are you know, that's a great opportunity to engage people at the same time as you're coming up with that name and feel for a place. So absolutely something to consider, and lots of examples, good and bad, out there to look at for how that can work.
Well, and you bring up topics such as the Rogers Center or Canadian Tire Place, that kind of thing. So perhaps that's an option moving forward too. Ian?
Thank you. And through the chair, to our deputation, I wanted to ask you, Matt, just about maybe to expand on what some of those risks could be. And I wanted to maybe preface that with my opinion that I do find that the branding in this complex has become somewhat confused. It started off as a hub concept, and that's where it initially began. I believe that there were some in our community that took offense to this hub concept, considering the idea was for it to be placed in Simcoe, or at least that was the most popular idea at the time, and folks might have taken offense to Simcoe being referred to as the hub of recreation for Norfolk County. And from there, we decided to call it maybe a Norplex or a complex. Maybe this wasn't going to be one facility, it was going to be many. And from there, we've come full circle to calling it the Norplex Hub once again. And I find that the branding has become somewhat confused. And I would like to try to nail down one name. We've had yet another group come with the Norfolk Community Hub, Norfolk County Community Hub, you know, and so everyone's calling it something different at this point in time. And I was hoping maybe you could also address, you know, maybe if that is a concern or and communications in general as a professional, what happens when everyone has their own name for a facility, and what are the inherent risks in, you know, not having a consistent brand, and how could that impact the project in the longer term?
Yeah, very good question. So very quickly on the risks side of things, just to be clear, I was talking specifically about engaging people in competitions around naming facilities. And so the risks there, I think, are relatively self-evident, but they can be, you know, people voting multiple times to change a name, coming up with funny names, things like that. Sometimes those things can play in your favor, certainly, and engage more people and get the word out, but those can take a bit of a turn sometimes. You know, if you're looking at naming, I mean, this is really not my particular expertise, but if you're looking at naming rights to places, there's obviously needs to be some policy work here as to how we're naming buildings and things like that. So I'm stepping out of my expertise there, so I'll leave it there. The second part of your question is very interesting and incredibly important, which is whether we want to start this project or move forward quickly with you know, with the real life name for this thing, or whether we're going to use a bit of a working name until we come up with something proper. You're right, we should settle on something both those ways. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is it helps us to really point to what it is we're doing when we're out in the community. So if we're all talking the same language about the hub, let's say, everybody in the community knows that we are talking about this project and there's no confusion. Also, what I've seen happen in the past is the so-called working name for a project. So, you know, Norplex, for instance, in this case, tends to stick around for a little while once it's been bandied about, and can be difficult to move away from. So people will continue to refer to this project by whatever we're talking about now for some time, because that's what's in their mind, that's what's in the communications that we produce, and so on. So, you know, whether we jump right to naming this thing and then moving forward, or coming up with as you say, a clear definition of what it is we're talking about, complex, hub, facility, whatever, we should probably get some of that terminology straight. It would certainly make things easier for communications produced, and easier on community members who are trying to understand what it is that we're talking to them about.
Amy?
If I may just provide a little bit of clarification, the reasoning, if anyone isn't aware, the reasoning for the terminology, the hub, actually came from the government. They were referring to these facilities as hubs for, so you would call your facility a hub to have it recognized for funding purposes. The Norplex name came about as to a competition here with Norfolk County staff, so a staffer named it the Norplex, at which point in time I asked our former CAO to please re-include the word hub in the name. So that's where there was a little bit of confusion with that. It's important to continue to use the word hub.
Very good. JJ?
Yeah, given the fact that communication, for one, seems to have a little bit of urgency to it, and fundraising will come along as we move along with the project. I was wondering if we could use this meeting then to establish one of our first working groups and establish that communication fundraising working group, and that they can have all of these discussions and then bring that back to our advisory board. Yeah. But I do agree with your point that, you know, we need to get some communication flowing out there and do that on a regular basis and weekly, if not bi-weekly, just keep people posted out there, keep that interest flowing in the community.
Right, and Matt, I did notice in your notes there, two other things under your key recommendation. One there, you wanted to get some young people to benefit from you know, the new rec facility and get those stories out there. I have talked to the Norfolk Hammerheads already about that, so we'll probably have a story to pass to the press in the not too distant future on that. So I encourage everybody at the table again, engage those communities that you're within and get some stories put together for this. We'll keep bombarding the media. The other thing, I saw that you had to establish an advertising budget, and I would suggest that, you know, after our site selection is accomplished, then that's the time to start putting that together, and we can spend some bucks on some pretty pictures and get the message out there that this is going to happen. Anything else for Matt? Gord?
Maybe to the chair and for discussion with Matt available, do we want to found that working group right now so that it can start discussions?
Sure, I don't have to do it all under item E. So let's develop a communications and fundraising working group. Do we have a motion to do that, Gord? I'll second it, if I can do that. I think I can. All in favor? All right, good. So, the establishment of a working group, do we have a chair? Somebody willing to stand as the chair of this communications and fundraising working group? All right. All in favor of Gord? Awesome. Gord, I was just reminded your first duty as chair is to make sure you leave space for a professional to establish that position. Okay, Matt, I think I can let you sit now. I'd like to move on to the RFAB terms of reference discussion. I know that at least one council member wanted to make some amendments, and I took a look at the draft as well, and it was a little bit confusing to me in some bits. So I think we should have a little chat about the terms here. Who on staff is drafting this? Okay. Right. Yeah, and I see that there's been a few amendments since I sent it in, so it was combined with the old one too, so it's just left me a little bit confused. JJ, go ahead.
Can I just open with my biggest concern comes from the section composition and term. I think we have some confusion about the voting membership of the committee, or maybe it's myself that's confused, I'm not sure. We have that as 7 members on the current document, and I believe we have more than that. It also goes on to say that the mayor is a permanent member of the committee and is not ex officio. And then under the first bullet point, we have the mayor as ex officio. So
I noticed all that stuff too. Ian?
Thank you, and through the chair. I'd like to move for the composition term of reference that the voting membership of the committee is actually 11 members. We have 5 from council. There's 5 sitting at this table, and there's 1 vacant position. I believe the number is 11.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Carried. Okay, that was an easy fix. 7 becomes 11, and 5 becomes 6. Moving back to the page 1 of 4 there for the terms of reference. I was just, if we go back to the advisory board's terms of reference will be reviewed and updated, and then sub-bullet B, consider the potential for utilization of alternative processes. Does anybody know what that means? Okay, I'm not sure either. I move that we strike that. Anybody going to second that? Ian? All in favor? Okay, I guess we can't actually amend this, though. We can recommend to council to amend it. So I'll make a note there that we have to recommend to council to remove item B from that. The other thing I noticed in that paragraph was talking about the existing 4 recreational facilities and the new facility. I think that was probably meant to be the 3 recreation facilities as well as staff offices. Is this correct? Amy?
I think this may have come from my motion for amenities, I guess is what I was referring to. 2 rink surfaces, pool, senior center.
Oh, I see. Okay. I would advise that we should probably take 1 step back and just do a proper requirements analysis on what we need. You know, we're going to get a proposal on a velodrome at the next meeting, and I don't know if we need one or not. I don't know what the requirement is, what the business case will be for it, but I don't want to rule it in or rule it out until we've advise whether to rule it in or rule it out. And, you know, it's a very intriguing topic. I don't know how many badminton courts or tennis courts we need in this specific area, anything like that. So I think working on a requirements basis first will help us define the land that we're going to need, and including the accessibility and parking. I was a little concerned with the parking size based on my experience traveling around to all these facilities. I just want to make sure that we start from pure requirements, and then we can let the artists kind of work within that size coloring box. But back to this. Sorry, that was a little bit of a digression. 3 or 4. Sorry, Amy. We've got 2 pads, a pool, and the senior center. Is that all okay there on there? Or do we want to just, I don't know, think about changing that to work on the requirements?
Through the chair to the deputy clerk, I wonder if you could just provide some clarification for me. I think that I have some confusion because this mimics something I put forward in my motion, but I don't think that this one particularly came from me. Is this a blended terms of reference with my motion as well as previous terms?
Through the chair, I believe it is. I can seek clarification from Andy on it. He was the one that put it all together, but I do believe that it was one brought forward by your motion, but also from the civilian group. So whether that was through Chair Anderson or Board Member Neville, there was a bunch of draft information that came forward, and so I think there was a bit of blending. But again, I can seek clarification for you.
Okay, thank you very much. The intent of, if this is something that's come out of my motion and is somehow worded differently, the intent from my motion was to just receive new figures for repairs, maintenance, and comparison. It spoke to the apples to apples comparison about these facilities. We've been running off of old figures as to what the repairs were going to cost us, and I wanted to have Bill just bring forward some more current information about the facilities so that we would comparatively be able to say this is what it's going to cost us new.
Well, that brings up a good point. I was considering that when I was thinking about the average lifespan of these facilities and trying to forecast this out. Do we want to just limit ourselves to a 10-year comparison, or do we want to try and forecast out to the life of the new facility versus maintaining the old facilities? JJ?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that the 10-year comparison, we can maintain that wording for the existing facilities, but do a full-blown life cycle costing for the new facility. I think that can be an added point. I think right now, as it stands, that's not a bad statement to make, to establish that 10-year comparison between the existing facilities and the new facility, just to give you an idea of what kind of savings are available just through synergies, energy efficiencies, and that sort of thing. So that operations and maintenance piece will become important to that, but I think we can add to that and a life cycle costing of the new facility for 30, 40, 50 years going out, because that will become an important piece in communications to the public as to what the new facility is offering them, not just a great recreational facility or a place to meet, but it's also going to offer them savings over time. And so I think if we stress that, it'd be a good thing.
I think that's all part of our communication strategy, Gord. Amy?
I would move to amend that then and include life cycle of the new facility between the existing 4 recreation facilities and life cycle, full-blown life cycle on new facility.
Second? All in favor? Carried. When I looked at the background, I'm sorry, before I go all the way to the background, does anybody have anything up to the background to review there? There's a few extra red lines. When I get to the background, okay. When we hit the background there, I think since it was history, I don't really want to change any of the red line. I'd like to pull all the red lines since it is history. Does that make sense? Because we can't undo what the old council said then. Ian?
I don't see why it's necessary to have the background there at all in the terms of reference. It's nice to have, in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you've come from. But in terms of a governing document for this board, I don't see the purposefulness of having this background history that we can all research, what's brought us to these chairs today. And I really don't see how having the background is going to allow us to better govern this body and make decisions in the future. So I would recommend actually, removing all of the background. I do see some duplicity in the composition and term. Again, we've got the mayor as shall be ex officio and 6 public positions, or sorry, it says 5. And so I find that we have some composition language actually in the background, and it's conflicting with the next paragraph that we're about to get into. So I'd actually move that we remove the background piece from this document, as I don't see it really contributing towards this group making a decision. I don't see removing it as being a concern or a liability to us moving forward.
Second? Oh, 2 seconds. All in favor? We got a quorum. We'll strike the background. Move to strike the entire background section, please. Over to composition term. We've already made 7, 11, and 5 will be 6. Anybody have anything else on the composition and term? Ian?
Me again, in terms of reference, I might be creating another one for another group here with Councillor Taylor shortly to come for our downtown. But in looking at the mayor as ex officio or not ex officio, I think both actually could be removed. I am very encouraged that we've gone from a body that was really council-driven with our mayor and former Councillor Peter Black having a steering role, and now we have civilian oversight. This is supposed to be a body that's governed and led by subject matter experts, and we respect your professionalism in your respective fields. And I was really encouraged to have a chair and a vice chair that actually weren't council representatives, and I think that's going to allow us to make a better decision moving forward with the hub, whether it be site selection, communications. I think every piece where we allow our advisory body to really have that civilian oversight is a good thing, and I don't imagine that our mayor would be of a dissimilar mindset. I don't think Mayor Chop would be offended by having that removed, and I think she's also, and I'm not going to speak for her, very encouraged by, we're getting a running start here. And I just think that removing both of those actually wouldn't confuse the matter any. I think we're off to a good start here at Chairperson Anderson. So I would move that we remove both mayor as ex officio or not ex officio from the composition and term.
I got to be honest, I had to look up what ex officio meant. So, sure, go ahead.
Through the chair to board member Rabbit. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that because the mayor is known as being ex officio for all of the committees, so you're saying that you'd like it removed from the terms because she would be able to go anyway? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that she's currently, Mayor Chop is currently a board member. And I don't, and I am looking at a document that says she's both ex officio and not ex officio, and I think it would, maybe clarify the matter further if it was just removed from the terms of reference. Maybe you might suggest that we maintain the mayor is ex officio a member, because we're likely saying the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, through the chair to board member Rabbits, that's exactly it. So so the mayor is known as being ex officio for committees. Council committees. And so there was some confusion in what the draft terms had. So I think if we said that she is an ex officio member, that's perfect.
That's good. I know I didn't write that.
I'd like to move what has been presented by our deputy clerk and maintain that the mayor is ex officio a member, and we strike that line about the mayor is a permanent member of the committee and is not ex officio. Just strike that whole sentence from the top.
Okay, we have a motion to strike that sentence on the top. Ryan second. All in favor?
I apologize because I stepped away. If we remove the mayor as a permanent member from the committee, is she still a member of the committee?
Absolutely.
Okay, understood.
She has everything, but it's basically, so she wouldn't have to be appointed. So the board members that are also on council, they're approved by motion to be on RFAB. Whereas the mayor, in her capacity as an ex officio member, can be on all and be a voting member.
Go ahead, Ryan.
And if I remember correctly, back to our orientation day, you did say 4 members plus ex officio, right? If I'm remembering correctly, or? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this gives her the exact same ability, it's just, we're calling her, instead of a board member, we're calling her an ex officio, which is more proper. Yeah, I apologize for that, that was my only, I had circled that earlier. Yeah.
That's quite all right. We had a motion on the floor, and I think I counted all the hands up. Okay, we had 100% hands up then. Good. That's motion is passed. And I'm sorry, does anybody have anything else on the terms of reference? Good. Now that we know what we're about, we can get started. Facilities tours. What can we say about facility tours at this point? Well, I can say that the places I've been to have had very enthusiastic staff willing to help us move forward. So again, as members of this board, any facility that you're at, take 5 minutes and pop in. They'll be quite willing to establish contact with you, and we'll try and learn what we can from all of these great facilities that are in existence now. Kim?
Thank you. I just wanted to make mention of our conversation earlier in terms of the facility tours, is that, like you said, these are specific in terms of that we're speaking to the pool maintenance and things like. This isn't just necessarily just touring the physical space of the building. This is actually getting some specific information. My suggestion would be, in terms of being fiscally responsible and being aware of time commitments and things like that, that we don't load up on buses and head places, is that, you know, certain people could maybe take turns, like it would be maybe 2-3 people going to speak to the people who are running these facilities and get those figures about chemicals and those types of things. I don't think we need 8, 10, 11 people heading into, you know, a facility. To me, that doesn't make sense. But anyways, those are just my 2 cents worth. Thanks.
Well, as long as we're all kind of violently in agreement here, I think that works. It's when you start having to convince people that you need to make sure that they go and they hear the message in person. I think with our board here, we're all working towards this end result, and we haven't come across any issue that seems to be contentious so far. I think, you know, when the time comes to discuss site placement, we may have a little more convincing to do on various people, but you know, let's see where that goes. Ian.
Thank you, and through the chair, I concur with Board Member Huffman. I was a little saddened that the event was canceled in its entirety, because I was hoping to get some lessons learned once we had the board members return to this group and kind of report on those one-on-one conversations that they had with those that are in operations role. So I was hoping maybe there might be another way where we could still ask those questions or get some of that feedback. I don't know if we could invite Wilmot to us. Specifically, I was hoping to learn some lessons from that particular facility. And I don't know if we might have an ability, maybe through the chair to Mr. Cridlin, maybe just to liaise with their staff and see if they can offer us maybe some PowerPoints or some early on lessons that they learned, or even from an operations standpoint, if they'd be interested in making the trek to us. Maybe we could get them a gift basket or what have you for their time. Trying to think also, what's fiscally responsible. And yeah, loading all of us up on a bus and taking a trip to Wilmot isn't necessarily my idea of making good use of our dollars, but I still earn for that information. I think it'd be very valuable for us, specifically the Wilmot Center, to get some feedback. And I do want to allow Mr. Cridlin a chance to respond to my comments.
Through
go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, Paul. Chair Paul. Yeah, I mean, there's to the councillor, there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, we could set up a phone conversation, video conference, that sort of thing, where they could set 3-4 of their folks in the room. You could have who you wanted in the room. Nobody's traveling. And what we found too is with most tours, we presented a few questions before we got there because they were like, what do you want to know? And there was always some keys. Like, what would you do different was the big thing. Now they've did it. What were some oversights? What were just the obvious things that you didn't see? There were 3 or 4 of those. I'll check my notes, and those really seem to hit home because you can see in the website what the facility looked like or take a tour, but it's those things when you ask them in private, what didn't you get right? That's when it really gets the wheels turning and good things come out because you learn from their mistakes. So I would think a video conference or a phone conference call probably would be the cheap way to go and should answer a lot of your questions.
I think after the first 1 or 2 site question periods, we're going to have a fairly standard question bank that we can send out. And I would hope that we can set a goal of hitting up a dozen facilities for answers to a limited number of questions like this, so that we can kind of look for trends and see what we can do best on this. And to that end, I will tell you, just talking for 5 minutes to the facilities manager at London, I picked up 3 really key bits of information. One, technology, the swipe cards that they use to enter the facility, gave them immediate feedback on statistics of usage, but it also allows them to computerize the chemical inflow to the pool based on usage. So there's great advantages operationally, as well as getting those high-end usage statistics to prove that we're using the facility. Another thing that they learned from this was that their site, they picked too small a plot, and the parking and just the getting into that facility is a nightmare off Wonderland. You end up just stacked up. If 3 cars stop to drop off kids, the entire facility is shut down until those cars move. And that was pretty impressive. And then the final thing I'll bring up is that they introduced a redundant pump system. So they have 2 pump systems. And that way, rather than like our current paradigm here in Norfolk, where we shut down for 2.5 weeks to conduct routine maintenance, we're able to shut one down, conduct routine maintenance. If one breaks, it's getting repaired and the pool is staying open. So there's good things like that to be learned just by a 5-minute conversation. And these are questions that we should be asking of a lot of places as we move forward in this design. Lots of hands here. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Through you to Mr. Cridland. You said you had notes. Is there any way we could get a summary of the tours that have been completed?
Through the chair, yeah, I believe so. There'll be something out there. Whether I have my own personal notes or whether, I'll look into that definitely for next meeting.
Thank you.
Sooner.
Kim, you were next. I think you had your hand up. No? Okay. Gord?
Just for the sake of efficiency, does it make sense to put together a small working group to work with Mr. Cridland in reaching out, making contacts, compiling the information, and start branching off with only a couple people to get this project started?
Hadn't thought of a working group to ask the questions, but I'm certainly not opposed to creating a working group. Do we have a motion on the floor then to create a working group for this?
That would be a motion.
And Amy's seconding. All in favor? I hate to not join, so.
Sorry, so that's a working group to work with Bill to get answers from other facilities.
Yes.
And I'll need a motion for you guys direct Bill to whatever he needs specifically. If you have specific
Amy, help me out.
I wonder if we could start by having Mr. Cridlin circulate an email to all of us with the questions he has been asking. And additionally, we can brainstorm on our own questions and kind of formalize that a little bit and come prepared to the next meeting with a full list of our own questions as well as Mr. Cridlin's, and then we would have better sense to send him off with better direction.
I would agree with that, and I would hope that we can do that before the joint session, because I'm off to the Etobicoke Olympium right after that, and I'll approach them with the questions as well. I need a second for that, I guess. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, I'm just getting the feeling that we're bogging ourselves back down again in terms of we don't even know what we have yet. We don't even know what we want yet. So in terms of gathering information for things that we don't even have a template. And I guess my question and my other point is that yes, you know, you're involved in terms of swimming, so you're more of an expert in terms of the pool piece, and I'm a rink rat, and we have other individuals who are familiar with different complexes. But ultimately, when it comes time, we know we're getting a pool. I mean, that's a given, right? We're not experts in building a pool. I'm quite certain that someone else would be doing that. So I think when people will be coming forward as we have our template for what we want in this hub, then that's where we start to gather that information. I'm just a little confused as to when we're not experts in those fields, the point of us gathering the information when we will be having experts come forward. Does that make sense? Am I making sense, JJ?
I'll just respond with first, and then I'll let JJ respond. When I go to the pools and I ask the questions, they're fairly simple questions, like what did you get right and what did you get wrong to start, but they led down some very interesting paths. I did not even realize that the London pool had a variable height floor so that the kids can get their 1 foot training and then their 2 foot training and that kind of thing. And had I not asked the question and found out about that, I would have ruled it out, because the only one I'd seen before was the Olympium, and they decommissioned theirs. So there's little gems, and I don't want to bog us down by waiting for 12, but I would hope that aspirationally, by the time we start evaluating designs, that we have at least 12 facilities answers to all these questions. That's my goal.
I would have to say I respectfully disagree with that. So anyways, yeah.
Okay.
No, I was going to say that this group could possibly in future morph into the group that looks at specification design review. But I think that what's key here is to just keep some sort of running documentation of what works and what doesn't work, so that when we do put together the requirements for the facility, we have the site selection completed, and we start to look at moving into that design phase, then we can put that forward to an architect and engineer, those folks that do have the expertise in designing these facilities, and say, look, we're on top of this in a way that, you know, this is what works for those facilities out there. This is what doesn't work, so please keep that in mind when you do your design.
Ryan, you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Through you to Bill, were you looking to respond as well? You kind of made a motion there.
Through the chair, some of it has kind of been talked about. What I was going to say is, on our tours, obviously my group was the operational group. We asked the pool questions, the heat exchangers for the hockey, ice rinks, that sort of thing. But that whole list, I mean, Mr. Johnson was there from finance. You know, how did you get your funding? We also had our engineers there. What did you need for servicing? What does a certain size pool need for water in, water out? Our planners were there as well for zoning, what was needed. So I just wanted to instill that our questions were pretty broad. And I guess it depends on what this group wants to go to. As Paul alluded to, yeah, you talk to an operation person, you get a lot of those little things, but there's a lot of maybe bigger picture things. I'm only recommending, I'm not directing by any means. Maybe you could pick on some of the higher up things until we get down to that. Yeah, we want a 50-meter pool, which is twice the size we have here. What do we need for pumps? What do we need for supply? That sort of thing. I just throw that out, but I think some of the members had kind of touched on that before I got to speak. But thanks for the opportunity to.
Yeah, I don't want to get into pool design, but I want to make sure we can capture best practices. And by talking about 2 pumps versus the 1, I was trying to just kind of get the idea of the redundancy in there for operational use. I want to make sure that we remain operationally focused, not technically focused. We'll hire experts in building this place. We're not going to be sketching that out on a notepad. Gord?
Just when I put forward the idea of a working group, it was my idea that you'd be creating connections with these different groups, and starting with what Mr. Quinlan has already worked on, start with those very high-level conversation pieces and build relationships so that as we go along the process, we have established networks that we can rely on and reach back to. So yes, not on a detailed specification level, but more high-level contact to broad strokes. Where did you start? Things that will help us early on in the early stages, and then have those contacts going forward as we get into the nitty-gritty.
Do we need a motion on this, or can we just press on and do it? Is that still a motion?
You already passed a motion to make a working group.
On the, okay, I'm sorry. So we're still just, well, I don't know why we're still talking about it then. Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry, I thought that you had requested we needed a motion to provide direction to staff, which was made and seconded but not yet voted on.
Through the chair to Board Member Martin, you did pass the motion on the working group. However, I was looking for a specific motion for what you wanted Mr. Cridlin to do specifically.
Would Board Member Melo's comments speak to that? What he just said, high-level conversations to work along with Mr. Cridlin, would that be suitable?
So you're not expecting any return at this moment from Mr. Cridlin? That'll be done through your working group?
I believe Mr. Quinlan has already started compiling this information from recent experiences, but the working group can review that and also expand on that with getting ideas on broad questions and contacts from additional centers that they compile from all board members.
I don't know if we need a motion, because we're not asking you for a deliverable at this point.
That's what I was getting at.
I think what we're asking is to just start building a question bank, and I think everybody in this room should be sharing any information that we get on some kind of database format back to you, Bill. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, yes, it does. And I'm wondering, part of that, would that be email address or contact information on who we may need there? Because I think that would come together, the questions, if I'm understanding it, as well as the main contacts for the facilities as far as operations to finance. That's what I'm hearing, and I think we can do that.
Through the chair, I just wanted to update the board that at our last meeting in January, there was discussion about having some kind of shared drive or something that we could put working documents like this together rather than send just, through an email. And that shouldn't be a problem at all. It hasn't started yet. I just wanted to advise, but we will be putting together basically like a SharePoint. And so we have to be careful. We can't put things on that could materially advance business because that's not seen as being open and transparent. But we could certainly put working documents like what Bill is suggesting on there. That would be an example. So I just wanted to update the board on that.
Parting shots on facilities?
thinking out loud, do we want to go as far to ask Mr. Cridlin to maybe set up some video conference time and schedule something in to have that, the high-level conversations? Do we want something on the books for that, or?
Ian?
I think it'd be sufficient, perhaps, to put it in under communications, and with the expectation that the next time we meet as a board, we'll have an update on that.
Yeah, I tend to want to let Bill run with this, and we'll just feed him what we know, but let him kind of compile it, and he can establish the connections on his own. I don't think we have to be in a room asking these questions at this point. We just need somebody to capture these best practices and lessons learned as much as we can. Kim?
Okay, we're just all kind of looking around the table. So actually, after what you just said, that's where I was originally going with this whole thing. And hearing that and reframing it now, I don't think we need a working group. And I think that if we have something that Bill is the person, so he will feed us back the information. So if we want to know about movable floors and pools and stuff, he would be the one that would talk to a complex that had that kind of thing, right? Does that not make sense? That's why I don't think we need a working group for that. I think that we have that resource. And as Ian stated, that would just be part of the communication on an ongoing part of our agenda, that's where that information would be shared. It's certainly, you would be the gatekeeper of that information. It's not going anywhere once you get it, right? Like, I don't know. That's where I was talking about us trying to maybe be a little bit too complicated and bogging down with different things, and people have a lot of other commitments. And I think as we get into this a lot more, we're going to need our resources better spent. So I don't want people to be stuck, with a working group and then
I can agree. I can agree with that. I mean, I'm looking forward to the discussion, one or two bullets down where we talk about the requirements working group, because that's really where I'm passionate about. But I'm not sure what to do with the yeah, go ahead.
So since a motion has already been passed to make a working group, I would suggest, if this is up for debate, then Councillor or Board Member Huffman, you would have to bring it up tomorrow at Council and up for reconsideration at Council tomorrow.
Are all working groups having to be dealt with at Council?
All motions that you're putting forward right now will be passed at Council. But since we've already put a motion on the floor that has passed here, it has to go to Council for reconsideration. Or, just yeah, final approval. Sorry.
Okay. Can we have a motion to not approve the previous motion?
That's the streamlining I'm talking about.
Ugh. Okay. We'll leave this in Council's very competent hands to deal with tomorrow. JJ?
Can we make a motion to rename this working group the Requirements Working Group?
Brilliant move. Sue seconds it. All in favor of that? All right, we got a useful working group. Excellent. And we need somebody to volunteer to be chair of this newly struck working group.
Can I speak?
JJ, go ahead.
Sure. Seems that the person that brings it up and first comments on it becomes the chair, so I'll put my hand up.
All in favor of JJ? Okay, JJ, you're it. Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. because we were initially in the facility tour, I would just like clarification where we're leaving off the facility tour. I am okay with Board Member Huffman's comment about streamlining the process and not spending dollars to travel everywhere. However, I thought we were going to maybe go into a video conference, hence why I made that suggestion. And now the last thing I'm hearing is that maybe Bill would just do that alone. So what is the status of the tours, facility tours for this board?
I would suggest that maybe the right way to go is to let Bill determine if he can establish communication with groups, and if they're willing to have a video conference, that he could set it up in the agenda with us, and if not, that he gather the information on his own, and we continue to feed him, and that gives him all the freedom to maneuver he needs. Does that work? Ian?
Thank you. And through the chair, Bill, does that seem like, Mr. Critland, does that seem like sufficient information for you to have some direction on how to report back to council and what our expectations are? Or sorry, the board?
Yeah, through the chair to board member. Yeah, I just, a little confusion in that I was thinking, okay, we can definitely get some contact information for each facilities. We could talk about some of the questions we had, and I guess with that, am I to put that together, or would this group rather come to the next meeting, and as the questions come, then the following meeting I would supply that, and if we thought, you see what I mean? I don't know if I'd leave here today, and it's an easy task to do, right? Wilmot, here's the operation, here's that. I can have that as a resource, but I guess any particular questions will come from the board or through the committee to myself at that meeting, and then again extend the next meeting to get that answer.
I kind of see this as an ongoing exchange of information. You know, if you can get the information right away from Wilmot, you're better than I could do at the Canada Games Center. It's going to take probably 3 or 4 exchanges and weeks to make all this happen with any one facility. So I think it's going to be an ongoing dialogue with several facilities in order to come up with this. We may not be able to just ask them, you know, how many widgets did you produce last week, and they come right back on this. It's going to take some time. So I'm quite confident that your staff will be able to run with this and gather some information. And when we have questions at this board, you'll be able to pull up what resources you have on hand, what you know at the time to answer.
Okay, I think we've got enough to go on. Sure.
Yeah, I feel very confident, Mr. Cullen, with the second piece to your answer to my question, that it sounds like you've got a good handle in a reporting relationship. You'll be updated when you come back and present to us as terms of what further questions to be asking. I think the only thing that I would add is in your discourse to just mention that we are having a Recreation Facilities Advisory Board, maybe the times that we meet, and there is an opportunity for possibly a teleconference or for an in-person presentation, whether that be by video or by phone, and that we are interested in speaking with them. And of course, this is something that's going to require you to ask us before setting something like that up. I think that should give you, clear direction and not get us bogged down in the details. And I just want kind of a nod from you that you feel you've got some clear direction, sort of moving forward.
The chair to board member. Yeah, I kind of, when I think it's a natural progression, because the 4 or 5 we've been to, they know who Norfolk are. We spent some time there, different staff members. So now we're just taking the next step and need more information. And I think it's a natural next step. I don't see any problem with it.
I think the critical thing is that that information can get shared with us somehow, be it a database or just a list of the places you've been and the questions you've asked, so that we can be pipped as to what we need to ask you in the future. Are we all good on facilities tours? Sorry to be bogged down there. Completely lost control here. Okay. The next item is project management. You got to go? Okay. We'll all say goodbye to Amy. The next item on this rapidly shortening agenda, don't worry, is project management. I think we need to have some kind of accountable process for this project development, and I would like to see it start from requirements, but that's me personally.